The so-called Modimolle Monster and his co-accused will know their fate on Monday. North Gauteng High Court Judge Bert Bum has promised to complete his ruling on the case in one day, even if he is forced to work late. Johan Kotze, as you'll remember, stands accused of orchestrating the gang rape of his estranged wife, eNCA. eNCA reporter Karyn Maughan has been following that case from day one. She joins me now. Good evening, Karyn. Judge Bert Bum, as we mentioned, delivering the ruling on Monday. We're told that he would extend court hours if necessary. It implies that we could be in for a lengthy and detailed ruling.
Well, he's actually said words to that effect when he explained his rationale for going potentially into the evening hours on Monday. He said that this was obviously a very complex case in which essentially, Iman, every single player involved has said that the others are lying. So he's going to have to make some very careful selections of just who he believes and how much he believes of what they've said when he makes his decision on Monday.
And as you say, he's got a lot to weigh up. He's got the material evidence, as contested as it is, and he's got the expert witness testimony, and as you said, this toing and froing, this finger pointing across the courtroom, if you will.
Well, it was very interesting because when the advocates were making their final argument for the acquittal of their clients, and the state, of course, arguing for their conviction, he was at pains to ask them continually just how much of Ina Bonnet's evidence they wanted, they expected him to believe. And he said to them, there's no contestation over the fact that this woman's breasts particularly were mutilated. There was damage sustained to her body. And, how much of her do you say I must dismiss entirely? Because something clearly happened here. It's a question of who did it and under what circumstances.
And to what intensity.
Exactly. And Ina Bonnet, of course, painting a picture of three men who were co-conspirators with her estranged husband, who ignored her pleas with her eyes for help when her husband went out the room, and she pleaded with him with her eyes to help me, please help me. They did nothing. She's saying they're co-conspirators, they should be found guilty, and they're saying they too are victims of Johan Kotze.
It's been an intense trial, would you say, from day one, and you've been in the courtroom, you've been closely observing both Johan Kotze's demeanor and Ina Bonnet's demeanor. How have they changed between the time this trial began and now at the end?
For me, Johan Kotze is a completely fascinating person. I mean, in the beginning of this case, when we first went to those court appearances in the Modimolle Magistrates Court, he came in there, stared directly ahead of him, would not talk to anyone, not even his sort of legal representative at the time. I remember once saying to him, "How are you feeling?" and just him staring blankly at me with no expression on his face. Johan Kotze has changed dramatically over the course of this trial, whether it was sitting and crying through his former wife's evidence, crying as he testified about his role in this so-called 2-hour torture ordeal that he allegedly orchestrated, and now to the point where he openly greets the journalists. He will actually say to me, "Hello, how are you doing?" He'll say the same thing to other reporters, and hugging and kissing his family in court, giving smiles and waves and peace signs. Fundamentally different person. Ina Bonnet has remained consistent throughout this thing, but in the beginning she would not look at Johan Kotze. She refused to look at him. She stared directly at the judge with her when she testified. She didn't want to engage. And in the last few days when he was testifying, she stood as he walked down to the cells and she stared directly at him, and he couldn't look at her.
She's always claimed her power from the very beginning. It took a lot of courage to go to court and, as you say, face her alleged torturer in court. She's turned from victim to activist in a sense. What is she doing now?
Well, even tonight, I mean, I'm going to Vanderbijl Park, where she's part of a group of 24 survivors of sexual violence who will be running for 36 hours on treadmills as a statement against sexual violence. One of the women who is doing it is a close friend of Anine Boyson, who just tragically suffered that disembowelment and rape ordeal, the full extent of which we still don't know. So Ina Bonnet, very, very different to a lot of rape survivors, came out publicly within days of this ordeal, said, "This is who I am, this is what my name is, I want you to know who I am, I want you to listen to what I have to say," and she has claimed that space for herself. However, we'll have to see on Monday just how much of her evidence was believed and how much the judge believes she is a credible witness in this case. We will be.
All right, well, we'll watch with great anticipation on Monday. Karyn, thank you as always. eNCA reporter Karyn Maughan.
News that moves. eNCA.com.